Peter Rex, welcome to the show.
Deacon Charlie, thanks for having me.
It's super great to be here. By the way, just a quick note of trivia. This is the first ever remote episode of this show. So we've never actually done it outside of the studio in LA. So we have that rare distinction of having that be with you.
And we're remote and we're together in person. So that's good.
Amen. Exactly. Remote from the studio. And what a location you dialed up for me today, my friend, because this is a spectacular place. We're in Austin right now, the headquarters of Rex. But we're also in this incredible location, which I wish I could describe. By the way, I gave you the window seat, right, so that you could be inspired by everything that's behind me. But just to explain to folks listening, we're in this great location overlooking. What is this? What is this, like a valley?
This is like the hill country of Texas.
Nice.
So right here you see some canyons. So people don't realize Texas has some beauty to it,
Oh my gosh, and how? So anyway, we're seeing that, and I got to give you props for hooking that up, because it's not every day that I get to do this on the road, and on the road in such spectacular locations. So thank you for that.
Well, yeah, you're welcome. And you're beautiful to look at as well there, Deacon Charlie.
Thank you very much. Even with the backlighting. Very good. And of course, Austin is the podcast capital of the world now anyway, right? I mean, I think Joe Rogan alone just achieves that end. We were just chatting a little bit about you speaking to the troops and kind of firing them up. And you're a person, we're not going to have any shortage of things to talk about, because I've been doing research on you, and there's so many things that are so compelling about the vision that you're trying to draw out. But what's that message of inspiration for the troops? Like, what are you telling your team of what it is that you're trying to accomplish here?
Yeah, so Deacon, today, I talked to the troops about what we're up to as a company. I had sent an email out just recently, a couple of days ago, really communicating to all of my connections, all of our contacts, that we are finally, for the first time, open for investment. Well, open it for investment into what? Well, we've been doing technology stuff, a lot of companies and technologies we've been launching. And our overarching goal, is to create new tech leadership, because tech leadership currently is a lot of big problems with it, big tech particularly. I think everyone knows that, so I don't got to get into it. But the solution that people are looking for is not the right one. The two areas that you hear solutions from is, one is you hear people, they say government's got to get involved, break up big tech.
Yeah.
But that's not going to work. That's going to prevent entrepreneurs from getting in there that are of good heart and creating new technologies. It's going to actually benefit the current technology companies. The big tech will be benefited from regulation, in fact. So it will backfire. And government's usually not the solution anyways, right? Usually you want the government to stay at bay a bit, right? The second thing you hear about is people like, we have to create a new social media platform, like a new Twitter, new Facebook. Well,
Parler.
That train's already left the station,
Yeah.
And besides that, so it's going to be hard to do it. But even if you did do it, that's not going to be the solution that we need. It's kind of a mirage in the desert. What I'm saying we need to do is we need a new tech ecosystem, because even if you'd had a new Twitter, a new Facebook, whatever it would be, that people can communicate freely on, the reason why it won't work is because down to the metal, where the servers are, where your data is being kept, that can be deplatformed.
Yeah.
We've seen this with Amazon. We've seen it with Azure. They've deplatformed people down at the metal, right? So you need the whole ecosystem. They can also get you off your payment rails, where you take, Visa, whatever. Visas kick people off, our Stripe, right? You've had these problems happen. This could continue to happen. It will continue to happen unless we have alternative tech leadership. And right now there's a monopoly on tech. All these companies are located in the same place, in Silicon Valley and Seattle. And this is a huge problem, because that's the top end of the funnel that controls our public square of where we have discourse. And that is the most important thing. That's why it's in the First Amendment, freedom of speech, right? Because in order to figure out what we think, we need to have a discussion. We need to hear ideas. We need to listen to podcasts like this, right? In order to think, how do we, humans no single human has all the answers. We got to have dialogue. We got to exchange ideas. We got to figure out, where do we stand on issues, key issues, important issues. And right now we've got a problem where big tech has control of a lot of these things. So what I'm doing at Rex is a huge idea, which is to disrupt big tech, disrupt the disruptors, someone said to me recently. And the way we're doing that is we're building new tech leadership, and we're doing it out of Texas. We moved here from the West Coast to do that. So we're right here in the area that's going to be the new tech capital of the world.
And by the way, that's how I first heard of you. I mean, I've known Christian, who's one of your colleagues on your team for a number of years, but I think I heard of you outside of that relationship in that move. You were up in Seattle. I think Wall Street Journal picked that up, talked a little bit about, and here's this, at least as it was positioned, this person, kind of maverick, raising his hand and going, I don't find around in this environment the kind of place that can sustain the vision that I see for the company that I want to build. So I'm going to, pull up the flag and head to a place where that's possible. And what most people maybe didn't know or don't know about you is that decision is made after having the purview of basically covering the globe and understanding where this company could be built. But you chose Austin. That's when I first heard about you. And then we started, I think, hearing more about companies, pulling up stakes and kind of going to different places, coming out to Texas or other places. But it was part of a movement that I recall having seen what you guys started to do. I thought it was super interesting then.
Yeah, we're the first company I'm aware of that publicly gave notice that we're coming over. And, a few months later, we started seeing other people do the same thing.
Yeah.
Which is great. I mean, we want an ecosystem of new tech leadership. So we've taken the lead on that. We're going to continue to do it. But we need help from people like you, which getting on here and getting our voice out there is going to help. And we need supporters and fans. We need investors. We need elite talent to join. So everyone's going to take a part in this, but we've got to work together because the odds are stacked against us. But, with the fierce fighting will that we have to do it, we can do it. And that's what I was talking to the troops about, is getting the word out, spreading the message about what we're doing, because as I got the message out to people, we've got a lot of responses back right away. And generally everyone's excited about it and they're also hopeful. And I think what people need now is they need real hope.
Sure.
Because you see a lot of the news that people read almost everywhere, it's all negative, both sides, right? It's all negativity. It's like everyone's selling people negative news, right? And they keep buying it. They keep looking at it and it's making people depressed. But we need real hope, and that's what we're building towards. I mean, it's building on new tech infrastructure that's going to be grounded, new tech leadership grounded in virtue and focused on serving and empowering people. So, and that's what we're up to out of here. So
you talked about kind of getting down to the metal, which I love that expression, but basically understanding that all this is an ecosystem, and it's not just about one thing, launch a new website, launch a new platform, but it's about all that, value chain that's all connected. And if one of them gets cut off, it impacts everything. I've been thinking a lot about, everything going on with the social platforms right now, in particular, Facebook and Twitter and TikTok and Snapchat. Were in front of Congress for the first time 2 weeks ago talking about some of this stuff. And my thinking of this is that on some level, these platforms have gotten to be almost like electricity, in a sense that they're kind of everywhere. People use them almost reflexively. They're part of everyday life. And so, trying to impact them, right, sort of outside in to transform them, doesn't seem like it has a lot of promise, right? You even think about the fact that Facebook, which probably has one of the worst brand optics right now of any brand in history, nevertheless hasn't really had any material changes in audience, hasn't really had any material changes in revenue. And to me, that's an argument to the fact that these things are so deeply entrenched that trying to kind of fix them from the inside is not really the approach, but rather, to your point, kind of create a new sort of ecosystem that can provide these kind of, a different way of approaching it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Facebook and these other companies, they have a network effect. So that's something that, people aren't familiar with, how strong that can be. But a network effect is a mixture of brand identity in the marketplace and also people that have joined, that each additional person that joins gives value to the other people on the platform. Facebook has over 2 billion people on the platform. Breaking up a network effect like that is extremely difficult. To give you an analogy is the BRIC countries, Brazil, China, Russia, have been trying to break the US dollar stronghold, which is also a network effect. That has not been successful. They've been trying that for, decades. I mean, trying to break up a network effect like Facebook is very difficult to take, a new platform and spin it up, and it's going to take precedence over it. But I think even if you did do that, that's not going to solve the problem. We need leadership in the technology area that is going to be grounded in virtue and serving people and empowering them, and people that have a respect for human dignity. And this is where, my faith, comes to play here. And speaking here to a deacon, and we could just talk about these things, right? Is that, it depends. You can't really talk on every dimension with everybody, right? But we can talk on that like next dimension level of really God, right? And how that plays into what we're doing. And as a leader, as an entrepreneur, it's the most important thing for me. And this is something that, it kind of dawned on me late in the game. It was sort of I got into business as a last stop, really. And I had always, I'll give you a quick backdrop on myself here, is that basically when I was starting out, I never really fit into institutions well. I was kicked out of Montessori school. Later on, I go
That's a rare distinction.
Yeah, I feel very proud of it. And it's like my parents were like, send him to Montessori school. Maybe that'll work. Then he gets kicked out. Okay, this 4-year-old, But then throughout, I had, consistent problems in school with administration, obedience, whatever. I just couldn't quite, fit in well in that regard, right? Then I go to the seminary thinking, because, as an Irish Catholic person, I'm thinking, man, I want to serve people, and I had a sincere desire to do so. which was actually planted in my heart, I'm sure by my upbringing, but also by a nun there locally used to serve the homebound. And I used to join with her because I was walking out of a church once, and I'm kind of digressing here, but I was walking out of church once, and I was like 16, I was a punk, usual 16-year-old. And I had like a bald, I used to shave my head bald during sports season because I was like, man, I'm shaving my head bald because I just got to freak out and focus on sports. I ain't got time for girls, I don't want to even think about it, so I just...
What was the sport?
I was focused on soccer at the time.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
which is a great sport because it has no future in it in the U.S. And so it's a great sport to be like, obsessed about, because then you really, once you come to the realization there's no future in this, then you really have to pivot, But so I was real focused on that. And so I'm walking out of church and I was reflecting on the reading in my head. It was just like in my head about what you've done to the least of my people, that you've done to me, Have you clothed me when I'm naked, visiting the sick, the imprisoned, all these things. And I was thinking, I don't do any of this stuff, right? And I'm walking out, in my simplistic 16-year-old selfish brain. And I'm like walking out of the church and I just think, man, this thing is bothering me, man. So I turn back around, I go inside and I kneel down to pray as everyone was already out, And I see this nun there praying, and I was like, yeah, that nun's like famous, Her name is Sister Grace Imelda. She's still kind of known in the area. She's passed away a long time now. But so I go up to her and I'm like, hey, I tap her on the shoulder. She's like in prayer and she's kind of like, who is this kid? She's from the Bronx, so she's pretty tough edged. And I'm from upstate New York, but kind of in the nosebleed section of New York City. It's still in the tri-state area. Anyway, so I go up, I tell her, I'm interested in, you do all this work. And I was just thinking, maybe I work with you. And she looks at me like, what? She's like, here's my number, call. So anyway, she looked into it. She found out my father was actually a person who used to help out with St. Vincent de Paul and stuff like that. She knew him and she's like, oh yeah, he's a good kid. She had me by. So I started working with her, taking some of her cases, people at homebound, and visiting them. And she told me one time, she said, what is the key to happiness? And then she's like, I gave her a couple answers. She's like, no, that would not be it. But sit here and, think about it. I was with a friend of mine who I brought with me. She's like, what's the key to happiness? Think about this. And I'm going to be back with some tea for you guys. So she gets up, goes and gets tea, comes back. We still didn't know. She's like, then she tells us the key to happiness, and she has like that glow in her eyes, is serving people. And I was like, okay. And that just like, boom, lodged in my brain, So I've always had this thing in my head, serving people, right? So
now at that moment though, is it anywhere within the realm of possibility that you might be discerning a vocation at that moment? Or you're just kind of had this crazy itch and you decided to ask a nun how you could get involved?
No, I wasn't discerning like a vocation to the priesthood or something like that, right? I was like 16. I just was vocation as a Christian, right? We're all called to serve the poor and help people, right? So I think it's just probably the Holy Spirit or God, after listening to that, when you listen to that scripture, what have you done to the least of my people, those who really need, really hitting me in the heart, and me walking out of there thinking like, man, I'm not doing anything in my conscience. Then I turn back around and come back in. So it was as simple as that got me involved, and then, as I played it down the road, then later on, I'm 17, 18, I'm thinking, hey, how am I going to serve? I want to serve people. I'm going to do it the biggest way possible. I think, okay, as a Catholic, maybe I have to be a priest then. So I go to the seminary, but, my obedience problems, carried through consistently into there. And the people there were like, man, are you crazy? Like, do you intentionally just not obey orders here? And I was like... I started laughing. I'm like, are you guys kidding me? Like, I've never tried to obey so much in my life. And they were like, really? You're really trying?
Are you by temperament, though, kind of a contrarian? Are you somebody who kind of you want to be the minority in a conversation and defend the kind of out there point of view? Like, what's your temperament like?
Yeah, so my temperament, and this is probably why entrepreneurship is perfect for me, actually, because, I'm going to come right back to that. I'll finish this kind of line of thought, right? Is it basically, so I leave the seminary pretty damn quickly, right? And it wasn't a fit. I am going to community college. Then from community college, I transferred to Ave Maria, which is a Catholic liberal arts school. From there, I thought maybe I'll go into politics. So then I transferred to Georgetown in DC, but I realized within a few weeks, no way, I can't deal with this. I don't like politics. So then I was like, all right, what the hell am I going to do? So I get out, I graduate, and I spent 2 weeks in the monastery. I just went to silence. There's a place in Petersham, Massachusetts with Maronite monks, Christian monks. And I spent 2 weeks there. They're Maronite monks of perpetual adoration, so they keep adoration going on. So I spent a lot of time in prayer there, all night in prayer one night as well, and I talked to the monk. They'll be around for spiritual direction if you need it. So I told him I felt this calling to go into business, but I thought maybe it's from the devil. I'm serious. Because, as Catholic, especially as Irish people, we're like, we don't think about business as good. We think about it as just kind of like almost dirty in a way. It's like, this is like low end stuff, what we focus on, you got to teach people. Like all my family are teachers. My uncle was a Jesuit priest, right? Or, he's passed on now. He's with the Lord. But those are the ideas I had in my mind, of how to serve. Those are the buckets. So I thought, okay, business, this must be a temptation. But the monk told me, well, why would that be a temptation? Like, no. Well, he said, listen, go back, and he quoted like, Old Testament, like something from Ezekiel. There's somewhere where it's, the thunder, it's not God's voice, not in the thunder. It's not in this, it's not in that. It's in the still quiet voice. So he said, go spend time more in silence. Well, I was in silence the whole time. It was 2 weeks of silence. But spend time before the Eucharist in silence. So I spent a whole night in the chapel praying, and I continued to do that the whole time. But I felt conviction I was called into business. Now, I didn't have a business background. So that's how I ended up going to business and entrepreneurship, right? So, but then reversing back to my temperament, it was kind of a perfect fit. So it's kind of, follow that voice in your heart, right? I'd say to anybody, including myself, to you as well, and the audience, because God knows best and he speaks to you and your intuitions. And I felt called to entrepreneurship. Well, the other thing I'd say is we need entrepreneurs, man. So if there's people listening that are Christian, we need people getting in there, man, because we need good entrepreneurs that are of good hearts, like Christian people coming in that are going to throw it down and help take leadership in the world, because business people are the leaders right now. So anyways, but that's how I ended up getting into business. I had this experience where I felt called. So it's really a vocation for me, right? And then I took that serving people idea into business with me. And in fact, the phrase serving people in business is my motto. So it's kind of from that initial encounter with the sister Grace Imelda, the nun. But it's also, additionally, I got it from serving with Mother Teresa's sisters, because I started a group at Georgetown called Mother Teresa's Hoyas. And her motto is serving Jesus in the poor.
In the poor,
So mine is serving Jesus in business. And then I put /people because it's the same thing. So, but then to answer your question, though, is you said, well, what about my temperament? Is I learned somewhat recently, only a few years ago, actually, by a woman who helped raise me. I call her my grandma, and she's from Killarney, Ireland. And she's been with me since I was in diapers, I'm very close with her. And she's great. She's always been 100% behind me. But she was at my house and she was laughing. She's like, even at school, you always thought it was always the administration's problem, And like, even in kindergarten, she's like, you always had to do it your own way, And I was like, really? I did think that. She's like, no, you would come back and it would be all these problems. They wanted to hold you back years in school. They were like, you couldn't you never listened to the teachers. And they had diagnosed you with, and she couldn't remember what it was. And I started guessing. We had some friends with me, and we were guessing, was it ADD? And she's like, no, that wasn't it. And I said, well, what was it? ADHD? And she's like, yeah, oh, that's it, ADHD. So, but my parents were like, no way, we're not doing labels. So I never knew about it my whole life. Yeah, so.
When did you find out about it?
Well, she mentioned this to me.
But that was a diagnosis that somebody had given at some point?
Allegedly.
Yeah.
This is elementary school, right? But likely my temperament is just one of these types of people that is, has those characteristics that I can hyper-focus. I'm also easily distractible, but I see things very differently. And you know what? That's a gift, though. Like,
it is.
These aren't people with disabilities. And it was actually very prudent and wise of my parents not to tell me that, because I never knew that. I just had to deal with who I am, right? So I never fit in well in a classroom environment. So I went to Georgetown, I went to Harvard Law School, and I got a JD there, right? Now, I remember one time I was talking to a doctor.
By the way, that doesn't stand for job description. That's a Juris Doctor, right?
Yeah, law degree.
Right.
So I got a law degree from Harvard Law. And when I was there, though, I remember talking to, you have to do these, regular checkups like everybody, right? I'm talking to the doctor, and I mentioned, hey, because a lot of my friends would say, hey, man, you must have ADD, man, or whatever. And I'd be like, I don't know, man, probably. And I tell this doctor, I'm like, hey, man, do I have ADD, whatever? I was asking him, and he was like, nah, it's impossible. You would never have been able to get in here. And I was like, he's like, did you have any special allowances for the test? I was like, no. He's like, so you couldn't, it's impossible. So the point is, whatever, man, I just would skip classes all the time, and I'd read books. So if I'm in it with a book and I'm alone and I isolate myself from people, I'll slam through material like crazy, right? So, and for entrepreneurship, it works out perfect, because there's always these unknowns and that you're trying to figure out, right? So that works so well for my mind, because my mind is so curious to try to figure it out. Now, if it's already figured out and I just got to rote learn it, and that sounds so interesting for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But if I don't know what it is, and every day, like you're working this podcast, you're out there every day, you have to create, new content. What are you going to do? You got to make sure the audience is being fed well, right? You got to serve the audience. Well, that's entrepreneurship. Well, that's fascinating. So it's easy for my mind to focus on those things. But if it's other things like, rote stuff, I get more difficult, like law school.
We're just meeting for the first time, obviously, so I'm getting a chance to kind of experience just what I've read about you. But it strikes me that, you're a person who can dive headlong into something and take all, try to basically get all of the input from a given subject matter to try to close the gap on some learning that you need or want or desire, right? One of my sons, when he was very young, 2 or 3 years old, we noticed that, had some interesting things, right? He was very fixated on particular subjects. He could spend hours just like tinkering with something, and we had to kind of draw his attention from that. And there were some things that he wasn't interested in doing that other kids were doing all the time. But he had, eventually he had a diagnosis of Asperger's. And, he's been very mainstream since then. He's 18 years old. He's a pilot, taught himself to fly after watching YouTube videos. But his characteristic that I kind of recognize a little bit in what you've described is this ability of seeing something that he wants to understand at a better level and then just diving into that thing, like sucking all the juice out of it to the degree that he can to better understand it, and then going, okay, now I can put the next building block in place because I've got this one. Is that kind of a fair way of how you view things? Is that similar?
It's similar. I mean, I probably don't have anything on, say, the spectrum of that level, though. I'm just guessing. I'm probably just like an ADHD.
I'm not suggesting you're on the spectrum. I'm just saying it's a similar characteristic is all I'm saying. Yeah.
And by the way, people who are on the spectrum are just gifted in different ways.
Well, that's what I found.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, to compare, I think you said your son is a pilot.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, like, I don't know. So it's funny because I've talked to fighter pilots and they were like, man, you would not be, you might be a good fighter pilot, but you wouldn't be a good regular pilot because I'm not good at, like, it wouldn't be now obviously I've done this because I have a CPA as well and I have a JD. So I've been able to force myself to do stuff that I'm not good at, but I'm naturally good at entrepreneurship. Now I'm not good at a lot of things. Being a pilot, you've got to be very programmatic and careful. Like, I wouldn't want to fly in a plane with me as a captain. You know what I'm saying? Why? Because I probably wouldn't even review the checklist, or, you got to go through, like, you got to be real rigorous.
Sure.
Now I've got a brother-in-law who's a fighter pilot. I would definitely want to fly with him. He's so damn careful and, like, particular, but I'm built differently, right? So everyone's, got different talents. They have all different talents, Deacon. And that's the thing with labeling people in a negative way or whatever. It's BS, man. It's like everyone's got these gifts and, like, they're just special in different ways. And it's kind of a blessing. I never even knew possibly that I had maybe something that they would have labeled me on. I had no idea. Now, later on, I had professors tell me, like, man, are you paying attention to class at all? If I ever went, and I'd be like, I don't know, man. I walk out of any class I'm in almost all the time. I go to a class, I walk out, I got nothing. Didn't really remember anything. I'd be, what the hell? But if you give me the books, I'll just, like, slam through it. Or if you give me a podcast, I'll listen to it at 3x speed. You know what I mean? I'll be, like, able to focus. But everybody's different. My wife would, like, drives her nuts if I'm, like, put it on, like, the car, like, podcast. She'll be like, how the hell are you able to listen to this? And I'll be like, how can you listen to a 1x?
Exactly, because you got to get it in there.
Yeah.
By the way, I think I can already say that it's going to be a challenge to listen to this one at 3x. So
yeah. Oh yeah, it's true. I'm already moving at 3x.
Yeah.
Right? So one random thought I had was, there was a movie called Peanut Butter Falcon.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. Recently, not too long ago.
Yeah. And it was by chance I walked into the theater and saw that with my wife, because we go in to see a movie and I was like, nothing was new. This is back before the pandemic hit. And I'm like, I'm in Seattle at the time and we're kind of going to date night, so
sure.
Kind of can't think of anything more creative than a movie. So that's what we did, right? So we go there and I'm like, looking at these different options, none of them are that good. I see this Peanut Butter Falcon. I'm like, that sounds kind of goofy. Looking at it, it could be good. We watch it. Anyways, it's about a kid with the lead actor is with Down syndrome. Actually does have Down syndrome. I mean, dude, it's so moving for me because look at these guys. They're like, Down syndrome babies are being killed in the womb in Ireland and other places, like, not in Ireland so much, but everywhere else, right? And it's very troubling for me because you think, what are we killing here? Like, these are our brothers, and look how much they have to give us, because, like, they just say it like they see it. And you know how much we need to hear it like they see it, because we're full of BS in our head. And anyways, these people are gifts.
Absolutely, 100%. And it goes to your orientation too, because if you approach things from a Christian perspective, you know that every person is an original thought of God. I think it was Pope Benedict who actually said that. And when I read that quote, it just blew me away that, like, God thought of you. And thought of you in a very unique, specific way. And that's why you're here. And whether it's Down syndrome or ADHD or Asperger's or whatever it is, that is the unique thought of God for whatever reason. And there's a role that person plays in this kind of tapestry of salvation. When you snuff that out, you're changing that story, right? And so to me, it's kind of what perspective are you approaching this from? Because the kind of more popular or secular perspective might say, yeah, but look at all the disadvantages that this person's going to have, and boy, aren't we saving them some trouble and some pain. And so from my vantage point, I agree with you. It's 100% a gift. And in some cases, a great gift that can be for that person and for others around them. But it's difficult to make that case to a lot of people who don't share that starting point of the framework of why people matter to begin with.
Yeah, Deacon, I love that thought. I've never heard that one. I love Pope Benedict, by the way. I read Pope Benedict every morning. So I listen to a thing that records it, and then I reflect it with my family. We'll go over a little bit, which is a little bit dense for kids at 6 years old. And I have 4 kids, a 7-year-old, 4, 2, and a 9-month-old. But my wife and I discuss it, and yeah, I love Pope Benedict. But probably one of the best intellectuals of the last 2,000 years. Honestly, he'd be up there top 10 in my book.
Yeah.
So. Anyways, and I've read a ton of them, right? But different intellectuals, but he's so accurate in his thinking. But that's a beautiful thought. And I would just say that it is our own short-sightedness. It's our own selfishness that thinks that they are actually not going to bring value in the world because we're too focused on things that we think is valuable. And we don't really know what's totally valuable long-term. And we need these gifts of God to help us to see what is valuable.
No question. I want to go back, Pete, to something you said a while ago. About this orientation and this passion for service that was born in you and that you've carried throughout all of these years in a variety of different manifestations. You talked about the importance of finding that service inside the realm of business. Anybody who's heard me talk has heard me say some variation of this, which is why when I heard you say it, I was like, yeah, that's exactly what we're going to talk about. And that is that we're all in a particular time and place for a reason. Right, we could have been, 11th century Africans, right, or whatever, Stone Age people, but we're 21st century Americans for a reason in God's plan. And when you look out at the levers of cultural influence, the levers of, power and all those different things, you see the business community in that context having a kind of influence that maybe has never existed ever in humanity, right? And so I view business as a huge mission field in maybe a different way uniquely in 2021 than would have been the case for business in any other age or any other time. And yet I find that our input as Christians and even the churches into that realm of business is very muted, right? So where I see a tremendous opportunity to kind of go in and be the leaven, right? Kind of like inspire people from within the business community to live this authentic life, to find this new leadership that you're talking about, because to me, that's a huge mission field.
Yeah, no, we could riff on this for sure. This is right at the heart of what I think my vocation is, and I think, I just didn't see it, but I think God saw it and he wanted someone in there, me, to get in there and start making a voice about this, that Christ wants in, God wants in, he wants to bring goodness. Heaven wants to come into the area of commerce. And the reality is the bully pulpit of today, the place that has the platform, is entrepreneurship. It is business. A couple hundred years ago, I'm reading a biography on one of my heroes, George Washington. I love George Washington. Mm-hmm. Good Christian guy, by the way. Don't let anybody tell you anything otherwise because it's not true. He's a solid Christian. But anyways, George Washington, at his time, the way to rise up and what had power was, military people, right? So if you were ambitious and you felt called, that was where you could have the most influence. Now, nowadays, that's still true partly, but now it's more true in a different area, and that is in the business side. Because capitalism has been universally adopted. Even China's capitalistic, they're just totalitarian. So they say they're communist, but they're actually totalitarianism and communism mean the same thing, but whatever. But you look at, now, where is the power? The most leadership right now, or influence, talk about influence, right? Where's the influence? It's coming from the entrepreneurs. Well, why? Because they are admired. So that's a big thing. They're admired by other people. So who you admire is who you become. It's a good saying, right? That's true, right? That's why it's important to admire the perfect man, Jesus, because everyone else is so imperfect, right? Now, we have other role models as well that are just reflections of him in different ways, right? But he is the ultimate role model because all of us are so fallen, right? And so fallible and human and weak in different areas. But anyways, but Christ wants to come into business. He wants to be a light there. And we need to be a voice for God there to say, in business, we can serve people and we should serve people. And in fact, we'll make more money by doing so in the long run. And when you don't serve people in business, when you're exploitative of others, then you will lose the trust of others and you will become something of a god. You start to think of yourself as a god. You start to put yourself above other people, and then you can start censoring them and dehumanizing them. And we see that with big tech today. To kind of continue the fight I've already picked anyways with these guys, is you see it with big tech, right? Mark Zuckerberg kind of being the face of it, but the other big tech leaders as well. What are they doing? They're bullying people. They are censoring others. They are extremely self-righteous, which is ironic because they don't have any values. They have no principles. So what's going on here? Well, why would they be so self-righteous when they have no principles? Well, the reason I think why is because they think themselves to be a god over others. So if you are God, you make the rules. And these other little peon humans, well, we can just exploit them. We can censor them. We can dehumanize them because they don't have the dignity of man anymore. You don't respect that human dignity that we know as Christians that we have to do, right? It's a high bar for us. And as a business leader, as a tech leader, I've got to do that, right? I've got to think about the people I'm serving. And the better I can serve them, the better I'll do long term. And when you're exploitative of others, you lose the trust anyways of your customers. And really, you end up being in a den of thieves anyways, right? I mean, who are these people, right? They're like, I was joking around to some other guys in my company recently, executives, and I was saying, what the hell is going on at Facebook? They have what do they have, like an executive meeting, and they talk about how, hey, we already have a monopoly. We're making insane amounts of cash, right? But we found out, and now we're sure that what we're doing is causing suicide rates to go up for teenage girls. Well, you know what? Just kind of hide that data and go ahead and keep exploiting these girls. What the hell? Like, that's crazy. Like, what kind of conversation is that? I'd be like, if someone came to me and said, I'm not sure what to do here. Do we continue this or not? I would be like, well, I know what to do. You are not working here anymore. You're let go immediately. You're fired. And we don't want someone like that in our company that even wonders what to do in that situation. You obviously do not exploit people for money.
Let's talk about that for a second. So I came across a stat not too long ago that, there's 6 companies in the world that are $1 trillion market capitalizations. 5 of those are American. 1 of them is the Chinese power company. Of those 5, you've got Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Facebook, I forget.
Tesla.
Maybe, yeah, Tesla.
Recently.
But you've got these companies, and they're all situated.
Apple probably.
Sorry, Apple. You're right. That's the one I always forget. So Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, et cetera. So you've got these companies all concentrated in a similar geographic area, run by people that have very similar backgrounds, similar schooling, similar political ideologies, and all of this power concentrated in just a few people. I got to imagine, and this maybe gets to the heart of what you're saying, is the reason why people don't act in that way is because that temptation, you're talking about more power in worldly sense, economic and otherwise, that's ever existed in human history, condensed in these just like few people. That's got to be a tremendous temptation, because I think about people like Mark Zuckerberg and Sundar Pichai and all of these guys. And as much as I agree with what you said, I also think of them as like, those are God's kids too, right? And so they need to hear and to be oriented in this way as well, right? And so like, how do you control, and maybe I have this question for you independently, but how would they guard against the kind of corrosive temptation that comes by virtue of that kind of power? Do you see what I'm saying? Because we've never seen anything like that before.
Well, we have seen it before, I'd say, Deacon, but first of all, awesome point though, that just pointing out that they are God's kids. And that's something that could be lost even for me, right? Because I get fired up about this.
Sure. I
was talking to my brother the other day. He's got, I've got so many nieces, man. All my family members have so many kids. You got 5 kids, I got 4, right? My brother's got 7 kids now. 6 of them are girls, so I got 6 nieces. And then my sister's got 6 kids, 5 are girls. So, I was talking to him and I said, hey, I was thinking, am I a little too harsh sometimes on big tech? And he's like, what? He's like, I cannot stand those guys, man. I'm worried about my kids, this and that. He's like, no way, you got to be harsh. So I would say, as we are doing that, to remember that they are God's kids is a good check on me, honestly. And I thank you for that, Deacon, because I got to remember that, right? And Mark Zuckerberg is a child of God, right? First and foremost. And that makes him my brother. So, I think, but now when we say that, does that mean we allow him to go and do what he does and allow other people to do what they're doing? No, but because we have to defend everyone, and we have to speak up the truth. That's the role of the prophet, right? We're all priests, prophets, and kings, right?
Correct.
We have to be a prophet, and we're actually missing a lot of prophetic leadership right now. Up and down, even the leadership of the church, they don't have the cojones to step up and say what is true anymore. And which is also ironic as a entrepreneur leader. I get out there and I say stuff about pro-life issues, and I say it only because no one else is saying anything. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like, so that's God's almost just like, I was telling someone the other day, one of my partners, Christian, who leads our media side, I was like, it's almost like God was like, he went to the banquet, like in the parable, and he was like, hey, all the people invited didn't come, So he went to the street and he was like, hey, you like entrepreneur business guy, you say something now. Because these other guys aren't saying anything.
It's a great point.
And I was like, what the heck, man? So I went and basically we created a video with our team about the heartbeat bill in Texas and saying, hey, this is great. If you want a government to do anything, what do you want them to do? Defend the most vulnerable. Who are the most vulnerable? Everybody knows that is a human life there. Everyone. Not one person knows that everyone knows that. The pro-choice people know it as well. And we got to defend that life, and no one's saying anything.
And that's something that's happened, I think, relatively recently, in the idea that you can no longer really defend objectively the fact that we're talking about anything other than a human life. I mean, even people who are on the pro-choice side have kind of made that concession and nevertheless still hold that position. But it's a super interesting point, because you're right. It's like this idea of not calling the perfect, but perfecting the called, right? And it's like, if it happens to be the business guy, the entrepreneur, then that's that prophet for that time and place. And by the way, in a long line of prophets throughout scriptural history that have not necessarily been born for that task, right? Just kind of called out of the masses to serve at that particular moment. I do think that is a role that, well, certainly you're taking, but that the business community at large can have because precisely of its level of influence.
Yeah, and Deacon, and to riff on what you're saying there is, you look at when that heartbeat bill came out, what happened? Big tech leaders everywhere, they lined up. Oh, this heartbeat bill, this thing about it, pro-abortion, blah, 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 saying stuff in the news, right? There wasn't one person there wasn't anybody coming out and saying anything for the pro-life cause on behalf of the company or on their own, right? I was like, well, what does that say? Think about these young people, right? Like, or just people in general that are looking for leadership and saying, what's going on? Like, what do I think? What should I think? They're led by others, right? Too. And no one's come out and say anything. So that led me to come out as well and take a stance. And like, even if we got one person out there with one voice, look at George Washington at the American Revolution, right? If he died, it would have been over. Mm-hmm. But that one guy was like resolute, like, we're going to win. And he kept coming, right? He felt called by God. And we got to work hard. And that's another thing, I'm just going on a segue here to the audience, to you. We got to get out there and do stuff, man. We can talk crap, but that doesn't do anything. We got to get after it. This is important. We're trying to educate people and get things out there, and we're conveying ideas, right? But we need to turn that into action. We got to incarnate the word, right? The word's got to become flesh, because if it doesn't, none of the stuff's going to change. And then you're going to see humanity suffer, and people are going to it's going to go downhill. And that can't happen. Like, we got to fight that. And you look at, like, mentioning George Washington there, he would work 48 hours straight, they said sometimes. He would just be working, and anybody who joined into his inner circle, they said they traded their comforts in life for duty for 24/7. And we've got to trade our comforts for duty right now and not let down our guard and keep coming. So anyways, that was a quick segue. But continuing on the big tech thing, because I left that thread, but picking it back up for you guys, is I think seeing him as a child of God, absolutely, but I think we got to call him out. And you look at, Jesus, he wasn't some pushover, man. That is like what they make Jesus look like. It's BS, though. They never read the gospel. The gospel is really short. It's a profound book. They should read it. It would take them a couple hours. It's very short, right? But Jesus was, they didn't crucify him because he was getting along with everybody. You know what I'm saying? Crucifixion was it was the worst form of punishment in the Roman Empire. And
it was a very common one in the sense of it wasn't like they reserved it for royalty. It was like the commonest of people were crucified and lined up in rows. So it was a degrading, punishment as well as being brutal. It was like the worst of all worlds, right? Super bad and painful, and also just like super common and degrading.
Yeah, and it's for your worst of criminals, right? So he wasn't getting along with people; he was calling them out.
Yeah,
and I think we got to call them out. And if they want to crucify us, that whatever, man, let's go. I mean, it's going to be hard to crucify me because I'm going to come out swinging, but I'm not as Christ-like as I should be. Maybe,
well, the line that comes the line that comes up for me when I'm hearing you talk, Pete, is zeal for your house will consume me.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I preached on zeal not too long ago as the combination of emotion and passion and all of these different things plus action. It's very difficult to be zealous without doing. And my question for you, based on what you said about we got to do stuff, we got to move, we got to make these things happen, is what's keeping people from doing that? There's a lot of people of goodwill. I run into them all the time, and people who in retrospect can go, you know what? I kind of thought that thing wasn't right to do. We should have done it differently. I should have said this. I should have said that. What are the obstacles that people have to taking that sense of goodwill or passion for something that's good in the world and actually doing something about it, which an entrepreneur naturally understands? See a market gap, attack the gap, build the thing. Like, that's easy for an entrepreneur to get. Like, what are the obstacles that keep other folks from realizing a vision like that in their own lives?
Well, I think right now Deacon, we're faced with a culture. They call it the cancel culture or whatever, and the answer to the cancel culture I've been saying recently is the courage culture. Like, we need courage.
Love that.
Yeah, and in the ancient world, courage is it's basically the limiting step, right? It's that with which out you can't have anything else, because if you don't have that, you ain't gonna have anything because you're not gonna do anything. You won't stand up for what's right. You won't do the integrity thing. You won't do anything, right? So courage is the first and foremost thing to allow the other ones to go. And right now we need courage, because the cancel culture and the media at large, and kind of, I call it big government, big media, big tech, the unholy trinity. The unholy trinity of big government, big tech, big media, they make it seem like, they're going to crush you, and you say something, you're out, buddy. They're going to cancel you. They're going to kick you off. They're going to do this and that, whatever, And they're also going to, soft discriminate against you. You want to rise up in your company? Well, you say something, you're probably not going to rise up, right? They might even start to work you out in their own little quiet way, right? So, and that's definitely the case. And look, I mean, these guys are doing it openly now, right? I mean, they'll do it to anybody. So they're emboldened by their power, right? But the thing is, the people have power, man, like crazy power, like power to the people, man. And the thing is, I'm all about that, So power to the people, man. The people have a lot of power. They also know what is right. And if they just grab onto that knowledge of what is right and they start stepping out, that's why I'm saying stuff too. I'm saying stuff also to create space and to give leadership and say, hey, I'm saying stuff, come up, step up, say something too. Let's go. Let's start backing each other up, man. Because if we don't, I quoted to the team today, I said, hey man, if we don't, it was from Benjamin Franklin quote. He said at the time, because he knew when he went against the British Empire, and when he went against the British Empire, and the thing that triggered him, that pushed him over because he was a loyalist, was he saw the way that the Irish Catholics were treated in Ireland when he was visiting, because he was like an ambassador in England. And when he would visit Ireland, he realized, man, that's how it's going to be for us colonial people. They're going to be like the Irish Catholics, like secondary, dehumanized, no rights, can't own property and everything else. So that triggered him. He saw the Irish couldn't even afford shirts. Like, they were just like, cold and stuff. It was just, poverty was everywhere. And that pushed him over the edge. But Franklin said when he, because he knew the power of the British Army and the military, he said, either at this point we're all gonna hang together, gonna be hung together, or for certain though, we will be hung separately. So I think, people got to bind together. And when we do, it will shock the world. When the good people out there, and there's so many good people out there you talk about, there's great people in Silicon Valley and Seattle too. I come across them. I would say they're the majority, man. For sure. It's the minority that's obnoxious. California too has been taken over by tyrants basically. But a lot of these, people that are up to evil, like, they're driven by these short-term motivations that get power and then push their political ideology onto people and shove it and bang it over their heads. And I know you're Latino, man. My kids are Latino, man. My wife is from Puerto Rico. Latinos, we don't, they don't, and I say we now because I guess it's my family. You have to. Yeah, we, because part of my family is, we don't like that crap, man, because we're into family, right. And like a lot of this nonsense they're trying to go cut in front of us with our kids. What? Yeah. Come on, man. Like, they're going after your kids. Are you not going to fight for your kids? You're going to stand by? No, man, we're going to fight for our kids. Like, let's just start coming up.
If courage is important, how do you cultivate courage?
Well, I have a picture of Saint. Every morning I wake up, I do 30 minutes of silent prayer, but then I go do my rosary and stuff like that right after that. But when I brush my teeth, I keep a picture of St. Patrick. And the reason why I do that is because St. Patrick came to Ireland, and I still have the faith from that, right? That was in the 400s. You know, the Irish were so damn barbaric. I mean, the Fighting Irish, right? I mean, we're still barbaric. But, you know, but they were so damn barbaric that, like, he was scared out of his wits, and he still came. And, like, that's why his prayers are so, like, he's scared, you know? Like, he's writing these prayers like, Jesus before me, Christ before me, Christ be in the eyes of those who see me, Christ behind me. He was freaking out because, I mean, these people were, like, savage, you know? They were not Christianized at all. Like, not pre-Christian cultures were nuts. I mean, they were sacrificing human beings in, like, France and Gaul, you know, under Julius Caesar. And he was like, what are you doing? You know, so this is just 60 years before Christ. So these places where, like, you know, they talk about the Aztecs were sacrificing humans. I'm like, yeah, well, so were you at the French. That's where Gaul was. But these you know, so he was in there, but he had that courage. And I think, you know, be not afraid and just basically look, you know, what do you have to lose anyways? You know, you're going to die anyways, right? We're all going to die. So, but at the end of the day, like, we're all going to live forever. So, like, this is a quick moment that passes. I would encourage people to be prudent. You got to be smart, right? So you can't be stupid. You got to be shrewd as a serpent, innocent as a dove. But I think, you know, you got to come out and say something, because the other thing is, what is it worth to live a life where you were a coward anyways? So what, you're going to be like on your deathbed as a coward? And then, you know, your kids would be like, oh yeah, grandpa the coward.
Sure. Well, that's scripture too, about winning the world and losing your soul, right? So, I mean, it's definitely in there. But I think you touched on the importance of the interior life, which is what you described, brushing your teeth and doing your stuff. And that, you know, that powers, and it's very easy, especially I can attest to this as an entrepreneur and business person for many years, losing sight of that. It's very easy to do. The calendar's going, you got this thing. Oh, it's just this one very important deal. And once I get that done, then I'll focus on God. And we forget that God's the Lord of time, and the Lord of the meeting, and the Lord of your calendar, and the Lord of the Slack, and the Lord of the email. Like, you forget that, right? So it's a very common temptation, but that focus on that interior life, I think, is super critical in being that fount, if you will, or font of courage. It flows from something, namely someone, and that's God, right? And tapping into that, obviously in varied ways, but is like crucial to actually being able to carry out that courage in the world, in any sphere of influence.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. And I think it's that, you know, be still and know that I am God. That's, you know, just that contemplation. That's what I do for 30 minutes in the morning. And sometimes I'm thinking like, man, I just suck at praying because I can't focus. But you know, but the thing is though, the reality is, you know, that, you know, God, he can communicate. He doesn't need to use words, man. We use words because we're imperfect, right? He is the word. So he can impress in your soul in that time. And then even throughout the day, right? To pray always, right? Pray constantly. Is just to have a mindset of that, no matter where you are, you know, I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm going to do it through there. And I'm encouraging other people, by the way, I'll do it again, another sales pitch, to get into entrepreneurship, join a startup, do stuff like that. But there's a lot of other audience too that do other things. You could be a nurse, be a missionary there, you know, like be a missionary wherever you are and serve people and be bold in that area, right?
I want to touch on another point about St. Patrick really quick and see if this is something that resonates for you as well. The other thing I think that's meaningful about St. Patrick in working with the pre-Christian, the Druids and all this other stuff, where you're right, he's turning a corner trying to go evangelize somebody and somebody drops a brick on his head or something. That was definitely around every corner. Those kind of dangers existed. But what St. Patrick was also known for was the idea of baptizing or Christianizing things. So not destroying the cultures that existed there, but sort of incorporating them into the Christian experience. One of the things that I think is there to be had in the business and entrepreneurial and all of these systems and processes that we've built is a way to Christianize and baptize them for the benefit of the church. There's so many times when I talk to people who are church people, you know, diocesan, they're part of the ecclesial kind of system, and you talk to them about a marketing funnel, or you talk to them about a product market fit, or you talk to them about these things and they're like, what are you talking about? Like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And in a way, it feels a little dirty, like to your earlier point, talking to them about these things. But if they can be Christianized, if they can be baptized, we can get serious utility out of some of those things in the church world. So I see entrepreneurship and business being able, that door to swing both ways, right? Is like, hey, yes, we're out in the world and we're influential and we're helping to bring this message in varied ways, but we can also give back to the church itself institutionally some of these great tools and things that we picked up for the benefit of their efforts. Do you see something like that similar?
Yeah, you know, absolutely. And, you know, to kind of segue riff on a similar point is that, you know, what is the church, right?
Yeah.
No, we are the church.
Yeah.
Like, you are the church. Like, I am the church. what was it in the book of Acts or something, or somewhere in the Bible, in the New Testament, probably the book of Acts. But Christ says, the book of Acts. He says to St. Paul when he knocks him off his horse, kind of, sees this blinding light, why are you persecuting me? That is because he is one with his church, and we are members of the church. So I think us thinking about the clergy as like this church and everything else, and then that also can lead us to complain about the church. Oh, the church, you are the church, like I am the church. So what we complain about, right? What I'd say is the clergy compared to the lay people, I'd say as lay people, and you're kind of in between, right? You're both actually. As a deacon, so it's all on you to bridge these things right now.
Foot in both worlds.
Yeah, you got to connect these worlds, man. The clergy with the lady, right? But I would say, man, this is going to be controversial, but I'm going to say it anyways, is that because, hey, man, you invited Peter Rex, I got to speak my mind. But anyways, what I'm going to say is that the clergy are not going to be the key here. The reason why is because, we've got a leadership problem there. And you got to remember, in the book of Galatians, chapter 12 or somewhere around there, it's got Paul confronts Peter.
Oh, yeah.
Cephas, right? About his scandal he brought. Scandal. What is scandal? It's when you it's when you, through your example and leadership, give permission for things that confuse the faithful. Well, Pope Francis is doing that. Now, I want to be humble when I say things because I am, respect the office of the papacy because I'm a, Catholic. But I'd say that he needs to be aware of that and there needs to be a course correction there. But in the meantime, like that, we as laity, as people that are out in the world, we got to do something. We got to stand up. We got to say stuff because we cannot count on it to come from there, to come from the clergy. The clergy, have their own sets of issue. And even throughout history, the clergy and the laity have kind of helped each other back and forth, right? You're almost talking about, it's almost like iron sharpens iron on the two of them, right? They need us just as well. They're members of our family. We've got to figure out how to help them too, right?
For sure.
You looked at under Charlemagne in the 800s in Europe, right? Charlemagne helped to reform the church then, because the church was very corrupt. And he helped to reform it. Now, he wasn't a clergy member, right? And then you look at later on, Isabel of Spain, who's now a servant of God. My daughter's named after her. She helped reform the church as well. In Spain, she reformed it, very well, massively corrupt, right? And the Protestant Revolution took off because of that, because of the corruption in the church. But you look in Spain, it never made 1 inch in there, not 1 inroad. Why is that? Because they already reformed. They had reformed all their monasteries, reformed all their clergy, and she did it by force, basically. But it came from the outside. True reformation often, and really almost always, comes from the outside. And I think at this point, the laity need to reform the clergy because the clergy are just rife with problems. And
that's not the first time it's happened, too. I was just talking to somebody yesterday about St. Catherine of Siena. Laywoman went and kind of wagged her finger in the Pope's face at that time and said, hey, you know what? You're over here in France kind of sitting around. You need to get back to Rome and help your church out. And I'm sure that took a tremendous amount of courage to do, but the church benefited as a result. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's like that door swings both ways, right? And can give back just as much as we're doing our own thing in the business world. We can be helpful to them in that end. Just out of curiosity, because you mentioned it, have you ever thought about the diaconate?
I didn't. I've obviously considered everything, but it wouldn't be for me. I'm not cut out for these structured operations, and so so I haven't. I'm pretty sure I'm not called to that, but I have a lot of respect for it, and you as well, Deacon. And it's also because you're a legit guy, by the way. In every way, I've looked you up thoroughly before I came here, so I'm happy to be riffing with you on this. I have a lot of respect for you, both professionally. What you've achieved is extraordinary, and also that you are a deacon. And you also got 5. I like how you also told me I got 5 kids, 1 in heaven. I was like, I'm gonna like this guy, So you're all around awesome guy. I've never thought about that. I don't think the diaconate would be good for me. And look, the reality is no bishop wants to have me under their authority anyways. I'm not going to be the best one, right? But the thing is,
I'm going to hold out a slight hope that, through some prayer, maybe something will change there.
Yeah.
I think you'd make a hell of a deacon, to be honest.
Yeah, maybe. But, I don't think that, I'm not sure if it would be good for the church structure. I might overthrow the entire structure. I'm just kidding.
My buddy's always saying when we get into conversations like this, he's like, look, it's just a matter of time. Vatican III, rise of the deacons. You know what I mean? So it's coming. It's coming because the deacons have played throughout history, and this is something I know you're a history buff that you'll appreciate. I mean, the diaconate was something very different, centuries ago, and was really the right arm of the bishop in administering and managing the actual diocese. And I see a need as the priesthood continues to diminish, especially in this country, that diaconate needs to take a much more important role administratively, strategically, and spiritually. So I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there because it's something that just hit me when I was talking to you, so I thought I'd mention it. So you're inspiring all this courage already.
Yeah, no, but what just hit me back was it wouldn't work. So
well, there you go.
But I appreciate the thought. But I think it's basically God, for whatever reason, wants me to be a voice in my own station here as an entrepreneur, and that works out well. And I'm in a unique position where I could say stuff like this, where I can challenge the clergy. I can make a challenge even to the Pope himself right now to say, hey, your leadership is an example to others. And if you have a meeting with President Joe Biden, and in that meeting, you don't say anything to speak up for unborn life, all you do is you act as a champion for causes that have innumerable champions. There's already champions for climate change and everything else. And you don't say something, and that's a hot button issue right now. In a way, you've said through your leadership that it's maybe not that important. And then he gets out and says he's a good Catholic when actually by canon law, and we know that someone like him as a public official, because it gives scandal, cannot receive communion. He doesn't say anything about it, doesn't correct it. Then we've got a problem on leadership there. And with all due respect to him, because he still is the Pope, and I think he's a good man. He has a big devotion to Mary and everything else, just like me. And dude, look, he's got so much weight on his shoulders, right? And he's trying to carry the church forward, right? So, but at the same time, I'm just speaking truth here, and someone's got to say it, and I don't think a bishop can say it because they're directly under him. So I'm just bringing that out,
I appreciate that. I'll give you my. I know we've got to wrap up and get you on your way soon, but just on this point of Pope Francis, I've got a theory about Pope Francis, and it's kind of a 3-pronged one, and that drives a lot of perspectives on either side about his papacy. And one of those is that he's Latino, okay? And he's the first one ever. And the Latino culture, as you well know, is one that has, a number of attributes, some of which are hyperbole and exaggeration and things like that, talking with your hands, that kind of thing, which, after papacies like Benedict and John Paul, and even going further back, is a kind of unusual thing to see just from a cultural standpoint. That's one that I think needs to be considered. The other one is that he's a pastoral theologian and not a systematic one. And his purpose or his area of study or focus or energy has always been on that particular individual at that particular moment in time for what's particularly good for them, given the particular situation. So that pastoral dimension is something that I think a lot of people, after great systematic theologians like Benedict and John Paul, we kind of look at in some cases and not fully understand. And the third one is it's the first papacy that's ever been in the fullness of the social media world, where he sneezes and we read about it. And no pope ever has had that level of scrutiny. And so I think the combination of those things, and look, that's not excusing any of the things that, or defending or arguing the point that you're making. I'm not. I'm just simply suggesting that those are facets of his papacy that are new and haven't existed before that we have to take into consideration. My thing is, they met for 90 minutes, Biden and the Pope. My hope is it's 60 minutes to talk about policy of whatever kind and 30 minutes for confession. And you know what? We don't know. That may have actually happened.
Yeah, and just to, I just want to really emphasize that I want to be respectful to the Pope as the head of the church. Really, Christ is the head of the church; he's the vicar, right? But I would just, my only counterpoint to that is, realistically speaking, he's had ample opportunity to correct publicly for the faithful, and his duty is to lead the faithful as a whole. And yes, we can say, give him. I don't know how God sees him. That aside, I would just say, in your office as Pope, you have this duty. You are not living out your duty.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you're sinning. I don't know. God knows that. But you're not living out your duty there. I'll leave it aside there. I'm a tech guy. I'm an entrepreneur.
I see your point.
But look, I'm saying it because someone's got to say it. That's all. And it's been on my heart to say it because no one's saying it.
Well,
so,
I appreciate that, and I applaud your perspective in any case on any of these issues particularly. One last thought before we get to our kind of closing segment here. Is your company, is Rex a Christian company, or is it a company of Christians, or is it neither?
Yeah, so it is not a Christian company. It is a secular company led by a Christian, because I am Christian. So I think, anybody can join our company except those who hate Christianity or hate anybody, because I don't hire haters. But I want to be a place at the company where anybody, man, you could be an atheist, whatever it is. You come in, you feel the love. It's not that we tolerate you, we love you. That's the idea. That's what we want to strive for, right? And I don't want to be like a conservative company or whatever, this type of political crap, I want to be just a company that, hey, you're conservative, you're a liberal, you're whatever, libertarian. Come on in, man. The purpose of one of the great things about business and sports, and people are doing their best to ruin this right now, by the way, and it really pisses me off. But one of the things about politics, but sports and business, is a great place to actually get to know the other people that disagree with you. That's because right. You're fighting alongside in a sport and business, right? Business is like a sport. It's super competitive. So you get in there and you work with elite people and you get to know them. You know, I'll give you a little anecdote. This just happened yesterday. Just give you an anecdote how intolerant the culture is. This would be somebody I would never hire. And in fact, we're not hiring this person. But what happened was this person is a very high-end tech professional, right? They get through the whole process, near the end of it, and they're talking to one of my partners, right, on the phone, or in person or something. And they had met me already. And he tells them, you know, he starts hearing some things thinking, is this guy kind of bigoted against Christians and bigoted against people that disagree with him, right? There's the only types of people we don't hire because that's a cancer. Those type of people are cancer. You can't have cancers in the body. So we only have people that tolerate others or love other people, you know, can join. But this person says to him, you know, wait, so, you know, I don't know if I can work with someone, you know, like the leader of this company because they started getting this conversation and it triggered him to start thinking about other things. And he said, but what if he ever donated to Governor Abbott of Texas, right? You know, he's like, I would say he's somewhat moderate actually. So I'm like, the guy in my company who's really not really into politics at all actually, and he's actually Hindu background. He was like, wait, hold on. Why would you have a problem with that? And the guy was like, well, I mean, how could I even work with someone who did that? Oh. Who would donate to someone like Governor Abbott? And he said, well, what if he was a Trump supporter? Which, by the way, I've never been a Trump supporter. I'm not a Trump hater either, by the way. I'm just not that into politics, to be honest with you. But anyways, and Trump's kind of obnoxious and almost want to smack him in the face a couple of times. But anyways, that aside. But but you know, then he says, well, what about guys who are Trump supporters? Like, we don't hire anybody in this company that is intolerant to other people. We want a place where a Trump supporter feels great, and so does a supporter of Biden. And the guy's like, well, I could never work with someone who's a Trump supporter. This is an elite tech guy. I'm not saying even what he's in because I don't want to give away who he is. But this guy in my company, a partner of mine that went to Stanford, really high-end tech guy, that's my partner, Hindu background, he's like, what the heck? He's like, this guy, so he's like, hey, look at some of these videos first of Pete online and reflect on that a little bit and call me back. So he calls him back and he says, you know, I didn't even know this guy was as Christian as he is, honestly. I don't think I can work with this guy. And I was like, you know, so he was like, wow, we dodged a bullet with this guy. Because that's what's going on, though. Like, these people come in, they're radicalized, and they're intolerant. They're bigoted and mean. You know, it's like mean. It's like a mutation of like liberals used to be cool, man. They still are cool, the liberals I know. They're like live and let live, hippie liberals, you know. But there's mutation of liberal that's like very bigoted and intolerant. And they're very vocal and nasty. And they're getting in their own echo chamber. But they hate people. You know, anybody that disagrees with them, they think they have monopoly on truth or something. But anyways, I'll leave it at that.
I think that you make a really good point. And we think a lot about diversity, and diversity is a hot topic right now in the whole, you know, industry, business, and otherwise. But I think oftentimes people forget why diversity is meaningful, even from a secular standpoint. You never have to bring up God. The reason why it's important to have Black, brown, Asian, all different kinds of people is because, at least ostensibly, what that means is that you're getting different perspectives. You're getting different cultures. You're getting different thought. You're getting different ideas. That's why. That's the root of why. It's not just a question of having a variety of shades of people and having them all think exactly the same way. So I think that point highlights that, which is you care about, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you care about diversity in the truest sense, and it begins with that diversity of opinion and tolerance about, you know, a wide array of thought.
Absolutely, Deacon. And I'll riff on that too. Look, my wife is from Puerto Rico. We've done a DNA study. Like, most of her ancestors trace back to West Africa. So that means like kids are part African, right? That means they're also from the slave trade. That's where and I told my kids, you should be proud of that because you survived that and you're tough and you're good people. It means you could be hopeful in darkness. And, you know, when I met with you before, we talked really quick before we jumped on, right? I asked you, oh yeah, what's your background? You're Latino. Oh, where's that from? Colombia? Oh, that's cool. Good, interesting. Now, where does it trace back to? You said Basque, Spain. So we talked about that, right? That's a unique heritage. Now, what is it diverse about you? Is it that you have tan skin? Who the hell cares about skin color, man? What are we, bro? Like, I mean, are we that superficial still? I mean, it should go down to the root of this guy. You know, this person's from somewhere different. They have a different perspective, different root. And I'm thinking, wow, that's an interesting background. You know, where you're from, what your experiences were, and who you are is true diversity. And we're all a unique thought of God, as you said, right? But we have these cultural things that have influenced us over time. And I like to have a diverse cultural background around me, right? I work with people from like Sri Lanka, India, like different countries, right? Hand in hand, right? And we're learning, and even people from the States, man, we have a diverse culture here. Like, look at all the people coming in from Mexico. They're bringing great diversity. We have a lot of Mexicans I work with. And I love Mexicans, by the way. They're awesome. They're going to lead the country. They'll be the future leadership of this country. So just do the numbers on it and you'll figure it out. And they'll just be like the Irish were, man. The Irish came in and people were spitting on them, this and that, but they worked their butt off. They had great family values and they came up, man. And that's what's going on with the Mexicans too. So watch that. That's a prophecy for you right there.
Absolutely.
But you probably already agree with me.
Yeah.
But now,
I already prophesied it.
Yeah. So you'll see some Mexican president coming up soon. But, probably more like 10 years or so from now or so when this next generation gets through college and stuff. But anyways, this diversity, they come with their own background. Mexicans, beautiful background. Very different. They come with their experiences and they'll see things differently. And you got to see things differently, right? So that way you can share ideas and look at it from different angles and then get to the truth. Because everything's about the truth. Entrepreneurship is about the truth as well. You're going to invest capital in this play. Okay. Well, is that going to work or not? Is that a good play or not for the company? Well, how do you figure that out? You got to look at it from different angles, hear different sides of the story, get to the truth, right?
Amen. I was told very explicitly that I had to get you on your way at a certain point, so I don't want to overstay my welcome. Before we get to Wait What, our final segment, how can folks keep tabs of what's going on with you, the latest, the greatest, kind of like what should people be paying attention to as it relates to what you're trying to build with Rex, and how do they keep in touch?
Well, Rex.com, that's REX.com, very easy to remember, Rex.com.
Super.
Yeah. So just jump on there. You'll find anything you need on there. We've got, press release updates, this and that. And you also can see if you want to, say if you're a tech talent out there, you're somebody else and you want to apply for a job, hey, come on in. If you're an investor and you want to back us, hey, we're taking investors. We're open for the first time to investors in our technology stuff. And we're going to do our best to crush it, but also you'll be a part of a big mission and what we're working on and with legit people who are elite and they're real players. And if you're a fan out there and you're a supporter and you want to just back us and be a voice out there, tell people about this, man. My major ask for anybody right now would be tell people about what we're doing. At Rex, we are disrupting big tech. We are creating new tech leadership that will be grounded in virtue and serving and empowering people. So back us up. People like you, Deacon, are critical, man. Absolutely critical. You've got a big microphone, literally. And we need that microphone, man. Speaking the truth and backing people up. Like, it's not just people like me, back other people like me too. You know what I'm saying? Like, I ain't Jesus. You know what I'm saying? But I'm going out to do my part, but I need people to step up and get behind us.
Well, count on me as one of those allies for sure, and know that I'll be cheering and praying for God's prosperity on the vision that you actually have, because I think it's incredibly well needed. So count on that. Pete, you ready to play Wait What?
Yeah, let's do it. And thank you, Deacon. And by the way, heaven is behind us, man, so we will win.
Absolutely. Amen. All right, question number 1, Pete. From what I understand, and you've already talked briefly about this, that epiphany about service through business came during a retreat in a Maronite monastery. Now, in this ancient Eastern rite of the Catholic Church, there's many saints, but one in particular was Simeon the Elder, who lived in the 4th and 5th centuries. He was a monk and ascetic who was a radical follower of Jesus Christ, and he was notable for his extraordinary spiritual direction and for the method for delivering his preaching and advice, which for nearly 4 decades took place in a very unusual way. What was that unusual way?
Well, I would imagine it might have been through, first of all, I don't know this person. I know, I know Anthony of the Desert, who was the founder of monasticism. I read a biography on him recently, actually, by Athanasius, written by another saint. Very interesting. He was the Bishop of Alexandria at the time. That's an interesting one. And he swears at the opening of it that everything is true, and the stuff in there is phenomenal. But anyways, that's a very short bio. I'll throw that out there for the audience. But this other person, what's his name again?
Simeon the Elder. Simeon the Elder.
So maybe it was like he carried on his missions through his prayer, obviously contemplation, but maybe also through bilocation or something. I don't know.
That's a good guess. But actually, what his unusual way was, or the unusual method was, he did it as a stylite, or what's called a pillar saint. He actually lived on a column, on top of a column, on a platform, in order to contend with all this number of people who came to him for prayers and advice. It didn't give him any time to have his own private austerities. So he discovered this pillar, he built a small platform at the top of it, and he determined to live out his life on that platform. And he did that on a variety of columns for 37 years, lived on top of a column and prayed and gave spiritual direction. So he was a stylite. That's the correct answer. He may have bilocated as well. Who knows? A lot of these guys did. So not sure about that.
Well, I'm definitely glad that's not my vocation.
Absolutely. All right, question number 2. Pete, you've married into a Puerto Rican family. You also talked about that, which of course makes you an honorary Boricua. So you'll do the fam proud, no doubt, by pointing out which of these is false about the beautiful U.S. Commonwealth. So which is false about Puerto Rico? Is it A, since Columbus, the island has changed its name 5 different times? Is it B, the Cathedral of San Jose in Old San Juan, built in 1521, is the oldest church in the Americas? Or is it C, Pope Leo X declared Puerto Rico the general headquarters of the Spanish Inquisition? Which of those is false?
B,
the Cathedral of San Jose in Old San Juan, built in 1521, is the oldest church in the Americas, and you are right, my friend. That is false.
Columbus has the first one in
the Dominican Republic.
I've been there. That's why I know that.
I'm sure you have. What's that, number 83 out of 85 countries you've been to? But yeah, it is false. It's actually just a couple years younger than the Cathedral of Santa Maria la Menor, which is in the Dominican Republic, which is the oldest. All right, you're batting 500. You're doing pretty good. We get on to the third question, which is guaranteed to give you a right answer, because
I'm batting 1,000 because I'm not counting your first one. So keep going.
Okay, good. You're batting 1,000, and now you're going to you're going to get an overage on this one because everybody gets this one right because it's a time machine. There's always a time machine question, Pete. Okay, so you get a chance to travel back in time to Rome in the year 60. Okay, there on the cobblestone streets, you encounter your namesake, Cephas, the Rock, otherwise known as St. Peter. Now, you know from all of your historical knowledge, which you've already displayed on this podcast, that he only has a few years left to live at that time before he's martyred. He gets martyred in 64. The church is emerging, but a lot of its practices are underground, clandestine masses, house liturgies, catacombs. In this conversation with Peter, he wonders aloud to you whether his zeal for the gospel can be better conveyed to reach more souls in the metropolis without getting more people killed in the process. He's willing, of course, to lay his life down on the line to preach Jesus. What advice, if any, do you give him?
Ooh, man, that's a tough one there. That was a tough time period. That was Nero, right? He was going nuts.
He was.
Yeah. You know, I'm such a combative person. I'd be like, you know what, you should get a militia and destroy these people. But that wouldn't be the right advice, right?
I don't know. You tell me. It's your question.
It probably wouldn't be. So being that he's the founder of the church, right? You know, man, that's a tough one, man. But, you know, the thinking on this, actually, and I've read a lot on this and I've been over there, but is that Paul and Peter died almost the same day, actually. They both got there after their travels. They traveled. And they got there and they both were captured. Now, Paul, because he's a Roman citizen, was beheaded. But Peter was going to be crucified. And then he said, switch it upside down. I'm not worthy. And if you go there, the one thing missing on the body under St. Peter's is the feet are missing because they cut off the feet when they crucify someone upside. You know, he was upside down, so they cut his feet off, right? So easier to get him out that way. But anyway, so the feet are missing underneath St. Peter's. You know, damn, that's such a hard question, man. But basically, maybe I'd just be like, man, you got to work like crazy, man, because you only got a couple of years. I know what's up.
So you'd let him know what's coming. I think he may have known. I mean, every day probably he knew.
Yeah, I'd be like, enjoy the good life of Italy while you're also preaching like crazy because it's coming to an end fast here. But, you know, man, I'm not good on this one, am I? So I guess, you know, maybe I'd say, you know, what would be cool is, hey, can you record some things down? Because he was clandestine, so I've read books on him because it's such a mysterious thing. After the first half of the Acts of the Apostles is St. Peter, and the second half is all St. Paul. The first half, though, after he's broken free, and they had 4 sets of guards on him, he's broken free, he disappears, right? It's because the whole Christian community was behind that and helping to keep it secret where he was. So they don't know where he went, but obviously we have so much evidence now archaeologically that he was in Rome. And he was in Rome for like so long, decades, right, in secret, because they all wanted him. They wanted to get him. But I would say, you know, if you could just write something down so we'd have more, you know, we'd have more about this, because the next pope, or he was staying at the house of a niece, and his sign, you know, what was his sign? His sign was the rooster. And why? Because he kept the sign of the rooster because it reminded him of 2 things. One, it kept him humble, his betrayal, because the cock crowed twice. But the second was the rooster crows on the resurrection. So it's a sign of hope. But anyways.
That works for me. Great job. Peter, thank you so much for being on the show.
Deacon Charlie, thank you.
Real privilege, and in all seriousness, you know, my great prayers are for the prosperity of your mission. So thank you very much. And if you're listening to our voice, I'm going to invite you to subscribe, to share this show with someone you love, help the show to grow. God bless you. We'll see you again next time on Living the Call.